welcome back again. I'm in the messy studio upstairs, and I didn't have time to do a whole bit of planning on this because I am running a little behind. Turns out putting out a new video every week is sometimes a challenge. But also I got behind the calendar as well. I was looking at the website and I fell in love with a couple different Valentine's designs. And as I speak, I'm 7 days out from Valentine's Day. So I don't have a lot of time to get things prepped as I normally would and scheduled. So I'm going to do a down and dirty tablecloth. And I know I've done a couple tablecloths, but they were just plain with a quilting design on it. And this one's going to have a little bit of a piecing element. I went through my fabric and I found this old Alexander Henry fabric from my stash. It's called Cupid's Arrow, and I really think it's beautiful, and I think it's going to be perfect with the quilting design that's going to go with it. So what I'm going to do, relying back on my beginning quilting classes, I know how to go ahead and construct something without seeing a pattern for it. I'm going to use 3 of these Marshmallow Batik squares. They're going to be 14 inches. They're going to be set on point. I'm then going to cut 14 7/8. I'll probably go right up to 15-inch squares, cut those in half diagonally, and those will be the inset for the top and bottom so that the edges are flat, and then I'll do the 2 on each end that will be a different size to create a rectangle. I could go ahead and leave it as the diamond shape at the end, but I want it square so it's easier to load on the machine. I also think in this particular case I might even border it with a couple inches of this really beautiful speckled fabric just to give it a nice finish, and then that also could be the binding. I have a couple other choices because there's 2 designs that I want to do this week. I had picked up this new fabric, which is probably a digitally printed one, and I was thinking about one of these 2 as the setting triangle, or the center squares rather, but also I have a couple of these that have the vintage conversation hearts, and I believe this is a high fashion fabric. Yep, this is high fashion fabric. Has the conversation hearts on it, so I may be doing this instead of the bright one that I picked up specifically for this. So, right to the cutting. I have my fabric for this settings, the center squares. There's going to be 3 of them, and I'm going to give myself a fresh cut at the beginning. I'm going to measure over 14 inches. Now I'm going to open this up. These 2 raw edges here are lined up nicely. I'm going to line up my edge with the line on the mat. I'm going to give myself a fresh cut. Measure over 14 inches. That's 2. Now I should be able to open this one up and get another 14-inch square. And there I have my 3 14-inch squares. Basically these are going to be set on point like this. That's going to be the effect of it. And then I'll have this filling in, as you see here, and on the 2 edges here to make it a rectangle. So the next thing I need to do is cut 2 squares of this that are 15 inches, because we always add 7/8 of an inch when we're going to cut a half square triangle. I need 2 per, so that's going to be, I'm just going to take it up to 15 to make it simpler. I think I have enough of this fabric to use as the backing. So rather than cutting my 2 strips from the width of fabric, I'm going to cut them from the length of fabric, so that when I cut my fabric in half down the long grain, that I will have enough left to use as the backing. And that will finish up this fabric that I've been holding on to for years and years. So I'm making sure that all my pieces are over the line so I can do myself a fresh cut. I'm going to peek through, make sure that they all got trimmed at the right spot. Come over 15 inches. Now let's see what this leaves behind. About 28 inches. 28 inches wide by 68 inches long. I'm hoping that's enough to get my back out of for this table runner. And now I'm going to trim from my 15-inch strip. I'm going to cut 2 squares. Fresh cut. Okay, we've got 2 15-inch squares. Now I'm just going to cut these on the diagonal. That means that as this gets inset, this part out here is bias. And so I'm going to want to handle that very delicately. And that's another reason why I'm thinking about putting this border on it, which would just help contain those bias edges. So now I'm still going to need some of this fabric for the end, but I can lay out the basic design of this for you now. Bum, bum, bum. Because we do have that extra 7/8 of an inch, which would be divided, I'm going to have excess room out here, so when I sew my border on, I won't lose the point of my squares. And you can start to see the shape of the table runner coming to play here. Now I certainly could take my border and just run it over in each direction around here and keep this point at the end of the table runner, which is quite common. But I think I'm going to want to square this up so it's a rectangle rather than whatever that weird diamond shape would be. And then I'll put my border on it, and let's see what the finished size. I can only guesstimate at this point. Right now it would be around 20 inches, would be around 24 inches. The backing is 28, so that's cutting it close, but I still think we could do it. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed, and I'm going to cut my 2 end pieces. For the 2 ends, I need 2 squares that are 11 inches, and so I'm going to go ahead and cut those now. The 11 inches also should give me plenty for my seam allowance. I'm going to cut these on the diagonal as well. And these should fit on the 2 ends. Like that. And then after I get all of these pieces sewn together, I can see what my lowest seam allowance is on the edge and trim accordingly all the way around before I add my outside border. So once we get those sewn together, then we could get to the next part. The way this is going to sew is fairly simple. This would be here. I'm just going to flip this over and line up that edge there. I'm not going to worry about how much excess there is on the end of this tip here. I'm just going to start here and sew straight out. So where I'm starting is 2 flat edges coming straight in, and whatever is left over, and then we'll press out the seam. And then I'll do the same for the opposite side, but on the opposite side the straight edge will be on this side, so it will be opposite. And once I have these done, then I can go ahead and sew the units together. On point quilts always look a little funny as you're putting them together. This is my center unit. I have my center square on point with the 2 half square triangles at the top and bottom. When I get over to the 2 ends, I have one of the large half square triangles and then the 2 smaller ones to create the flat end. You can see that on both sides. So I will have a flat edge there, a flat edge on the other side, and also at this point I can get a much better accurate reading. So that's just under 20 inches, but I'm going to add a little bit of this border fabric. So I have 2 more seams to put together, and I'm going to pin right here where this intersection is of the 2 corners of the setting squares, the on point squares, and then this will be finished. Then I'll just trim up the outside a little bit, and I'll iron my wrinkly fabric, and we will have a little table runner. And this big square will be explained a little bit better once we do the quilting, because I'm going to put 4 motifs in here. My camera battery is getting low, so I'm going to have to wrap this up. But you can see I have all of my setting triangles in on my table runner. I have 2-inch strips cut that I'm going to add to all 4 sides of this. and then I'm going to go ahead and get this loaded on the frame. So the next time you see this will probably be downstairs when we have this ready to quilt. And that's it for this segment. I'll see you, probably it will be tomorrow for me. It'll be just a few minutes for you, and we'll get this loaded and I'll show you what design I'm going to use on here. Well, it's a brand new day for me. I think I even changed my shirt since yesterday. What I've done is I already had a design in mind for my table runner. It was really inspired by the fabric that I chose for the table runner, which has really adorable cherubs with arrows. And the name of this design is called Matchmaker. It's a brand new design, at least at the time of this filming, and it was designed by Melonie Caldwell. One of the neat things about getting a digital design is they always include this PDF. The PDF has the design on it, which has more repeats than just the one single, but also in the upper left-hand corner, I think that's right, no, upper right-hand corner, you'll see that there's 3 different colors of what this actually looks like in rows. So in red on the PDF would be the echo or the repeat, and the center is the main design, and it just shows you how they interlock together. The other thing that I find very useful about these PDF or the website itself is that it tells you the size of this design. This particular one is 11 inches high, which is the height of the pattern itself as it stitches out. Because in general we do not make these designs, that's me or you, we don't have any idea what size they were intended to be, and they don't necessarily come up on the tablet or on any computerized system in the exact size that they were meant to be. They just come in based on the size of the quilt that you give it. So it could be up or down a little bit. And one of the mistakes I was making, it's something I still don't understand, but I'll show you on the tablet. There's a pattern height and row height, and I was going by the row height, which I should have been going by the pattern height. So that's a correction that I am making now, and I will show you that. The weird thing about it is that we adjust the row height. You can't directly adjust the pattern height, but it's the pattern height we're really shooting for. So in this case it was 11 inch. I won't necessarily be able to get it exactly to 11. It might be something like 10.96757 and so on, which is a weird thing, I think, at least about the IntelliQuilter system, but it's something that we can easily adapt to. So I already have the table runner loaded on the machine. The focus fabric on the top of the table runner is also what I used on the back. I'm using an isocord thread. This is kind of a garnet color, and I chose this based on the pattern itself, which is cherubs with arrows and hearts, so we think red. And I wanted a little bit deeper red because I used a little bit deeper red as my little border treatment. So that's what I used. Isocord on both the top and bottom. Because it's a cream background, I have cream on the back, the bobbin thread. I'll see if I need to change that to red. I might get some little tiny white speckling in my stitches, but I'm not sure that will bother me. So at any rate, I'm going to get my thread loaded, and we'll go ahead and get the design loaded, and you can see how this stitches up. And again, it's a brand new design called Matchmaker by Melonie Caldwell. You can sit and look at my quilt top while I load my thread. Shouldn't take me too long to do that. It's always the seeing to get it through the loops right is the trickiest part of this. When I use the IntelliQuilter, there's a thread sensor that I always like to use. Some people say that it gives them false errors, but I've never really had too much problem with that. Usually when it tells me I have a thread break, it's because I actually do have a thread break. And I'm making sure my foot is up. For newbies, almost any machine I've ever seen, the presser foot has to be in the up position in order for you to load the thread and get it in the tension clamps. If you're getting big loops on the back of your sewing, whether it's piecing or quilting, that is almost always because you threaded the machine without raising the presser foot. When the presser foot's up, the clamps are open and allows the thread to go in there. When the presser foot is down, the clamps close and there's no way to feed that thread as we're loading it into the presser clamps. Pressure, the tension gauge. Okay, we're getting to the part where we're actually going to load the design. At my IntelliQuilter main menu, I'm going to hit Design So Quilt, even though it's a table runner. Starting new. I have a work in progress. Do I want to replace it? Yes, because that's whatever I finished. Or do I want to permanently erase it? Yes, because I'm finished. And do I want to reset the clock? Yes. I'm going to be doing a pantograph, and I'm going to enter the size of my top manually. And it's always a funny thing because I always naturally think of the first number as the smaller number for whatever reason, but this is a table runner, so the width is going to be 63, and the height I'm going to put at 24, which is going to give me a little excess. So I can hit continue, and you can see here the visual representation of my table runner, and so I'll hit finished on that. I know that my design is in my downloads because I just put it on there with my USB stick. Just downloaded it. It's called Matchmaker, so I can hit M for Matchmaker, and I see it here. If you see on the screen, I've eliminated the UPC number from the beginning of the file when I downloaded it from Urban Elements. I did that both for the PDF and for the design, and then I included the height. I really like to see the height when I'm on the tablet as a refresher for what size it's meant to be. So I can hit continue, and I'm going to select it again for you getting an even and odd row selection. So you can see my designs here, and there's a little bit of a gap both at the top, middle, and bottom that I don't want. So I'm going to hit the gap function and just drag this with my finger until I get it where I'm happier with it. And you also could use the up and down arrow buttons to accomplish the same thing. But once you get it where you want it, you can hit finished. I'm going to go back because I want to adjust the height. Here it says row height is 12 inches, which doesn't sound that bad. But right below it, it says pattern height is 14.815 inches. That's a lot bigger than the 11 inches that it was intended to be. So my design would be, 3 or 4 inches larger. So I'm going to select that function, and what you'll see highlighted is the row height. Excuse me. But what I actually want to adjust is the pattern height. We don't get the option to affect that directly as far as I know. So I'm going to just hit the minus button, which is decreasing the row height and the pattern height at the same time. And I'm going to keep going, and I'm looking at the number that's not highlighted until I get down to 11 inches. And here we are at 10.967. If I go up, I'm at 11.022. It's a toss-up which one I want. So I'm going to go for the 10.967. That's going to give me my nice row of the cherubs with the arrow, which will run right through the center of my white blocks, which is really what I wanted to do, to have a place for these quilting design to show up. Of course, it's also going to show up on the printed fabric, but I wanted these bold squares on point so that my design would show up really well there. That's why I'm using that nice dark garnet thread. So I'm going to go ahead and hit finished. I'm going to accept the transition. The transitions basically is what happens when it sews off of the quilt at the edge, and continuous just means it will sew off and sew down and back onto the quilt in order to get the completion of the pattern. I could also have it stop and let me cut the thread every single time, but because this is happening off of the quilt, a continuous sewing is fine. So I'm going to accept that, and I made a critical error, but I will do the whole process again. I need to have the machine in the upper left-hand corner as I'm editing this design in, so it knows where its start point is. I did not do that, so I'm going to go ahead and repeat that in the upper left-hand corner, but it's easier for you to see the tablet here in the center front, so I'll do that while you're in between sections here, and then we'll start back when we get in the corner. We're going to go ahead and start our second row. It'll go over to the start position and take a single stitch. Then I can go ahead and pull up the thread. I'm going to come to the other side and start that so I can hold those threads. I always oversize the design so you can see it stitched off the edge and the top a little bit, but it will continue down onto the tabletop runner, and we'll really start to get good images of the pattern once we get onto this center block that's set on point. This is really going to be the big pass where the whole design will be stitched out on the block so we can see it. I've already pulled up my thread at the beginning. To hear that, I forgot to put manual. So I have 3 basting stitches. At any rate, we're going to be sewing out the cherub right through the center here this time, and we'll be able to get a good look at the whole design. I will probably pause the camera at some point so I can take some pictures or post video for Instagram also after this gets released. So we have 6 minutes left on this design, and then this particular table runner will be finished. I think I'm going to try and do another Valentine's table runner before the week is out. This particular one called Matchmaker really got my attention when it was released this week because I had this fabric that I thought matched it perfectly. So I went ahead and made the table runner specifically so I could use this design. That's it for the quilting on this table runner. It went pretty quick. Probably took me longer, well, it certainly took me longer to piece it than it did to quilt it. But I'm going to go ahead and get this off the frame and trim it up, and then I'll show you what that looks like on the presentation table. And then I'm going to get started on another one because there really were two that I wanted to get done this week, both on that Valentine theme. So I'm going to get this off and we'll meet you back at the table. We used the PDF file on the digital download to show us how the design would interlock. The PDF also gave us information on what the actual height of this design was designed to start out with. It was an 11-inch design, and that's how I programmed it into the IntelliQuilter. And you can see we have the finished piece. I used isocord thread for the top that was kind of a garnet color. I kind of chose it based on the little border color that I used. But on the back, I just used cream colored that would blend in with the background of the same print that's on the front. So you can see that on the back you get the beautiful texture, and on the front with the higher contrast thread you get the beautiful design of the chair with the bow and the hearts. So this is another one that we could put on the books for complete. I will go ahead and make a binding out of this same fabric that I had for the border, so that will just blend out. And where I have a little bit of puckering on the edge, I can just remove my basting stitches, and that will ease that out. One of the edges seemed like it had, probably this one, looked like it was a little puckery. But that'll solve that problem. So this is another one that's finished. I think it's adorable for Valentine's Day if you like to have seasonal decor on the tabletop, but this would be cute as a wall hanging also, or you could even just stitch out little fabric cards to give to people. So this was a good one, and I want to thank you for stopping in today and spending some time with us here in the studio, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.